My guest today was the councillor for Ward 7 in Waterloo, the Uptown Ward, from 2010 to 2018. One might say that her foray into municipal politics was inevitable or foretold, her father having been the mayor of Ottawa from 1985 to 1991. She worked for 10 years with CTV as a reporter, her last posting being in Waterloo Region, where she thrived in covering the local municipal scene. She liked it so much, or frustrated by it so much, that she threw her hat into the ring and, at the young age of 36, the good folk of Ward 7 took her up on it. Today, she is the CEO of her own global public relations agency. Her LinkedIn profile describes her areas as communication strategy, tech PR, media training, pitch coaching, speaker, politics. I suspect that this will be a high-energy podcast today. I'm really pleased that she has made some time available in her very busy schedule, and I'm really looking forward to our discussion today. Welcome to the Old Grey Mayors podcast, Melissa Durrell. Hi, Melissa.
Thanks, Rob.
Hey, Melissa.
A little gray around my ears.
Oh, come on. We don't have to tell anybody you're young forever, okay? You look fabulous. But it's only an audio, so nobody will be able to tell. You had a long interest in politics growing up, no doubt. I'm just curious because, I've got 3 daughters and I was mayor and it was during their teen years and I've always wondered what they thought about it. Never really asked them much about it. But tell me, from your perspective, what was it like seeing your dad as the mayor of Ottawa and you hanging out?
Yeah, Ottawa's the capital of Canada. So it's a really interesting city, I think, to be the mayor of because, you do have hanging over your head is the federal government, which basically runs the city. But during that time, my dad was such a visionary and, a big part of, he was a big sports guy, always was. I knew how to throw a football at like 3 or 4 years old. I can throw a great spiral. And so I think for him, it was about, so we had the Ottawa Senators join, which was, it's a hell of a story. You should interview my dad about that story. That's a great
that would be interesting for sure. And he actually got a job with the Senators eventually, correct?
Yeah, so he moved over and he was sort of doing both jobs and then left the council to go over to be president.
Dream come true. But tell me, Melissa, you're a kid. How old were you when he was mayor? And we're not giving away a whole lot here by age, but how old were you when he was mayor?
Yeah, so I would have been a teenager. I was a teenager up until, so my main teen years, much like your daughters.
Did you help him out in the campaigns?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And it was old school. We were actually laughing the other day. He was like the only one on the campaign trail that had a phone. And the phone would have been the biggest phone you could possibly imagine. Like
one of those Russian knockoffs or something.
Yeah, like Saved by the Bell, like gigantic. And you had to charge it in only 20 minutes of charge. We rented a bus, an OC Transpo bus, and had
my God,
logos on the side. And we'd run around malls and shake hands and hand out stuff. I would do the phone banks. Ottawa's a big city. So, we, just calling people. Hi, I'm Jim Durrell's daughter, Melissa Durrell. I'm wondering if you're going to vote for him. And we had our color codes of, who we knew who were voting for him and not. It was a lot of fun. I've always loved campaigns. Even when I was in Toronto going to university for journalism, I worked on a couple of provincial and federal campaigns, door knocking and connecting with community and big ideas. I love big ideas. I've always been.
So you cut your teeth early on campaigning. And so now, so how is it you ended up in journalism as a career?
Well, obviously it's pretty apparent. My dad was my major mentor in my life. And as I was going into university, I really thought politics was where I wanted to, make a stand, help community, see what I could do. And he said, there's very little power in politics. Journalism is where the power is. They're the ones and I think he was a bit scarred from his years as a politician.
Probably.
Really hard on him. And so he was like, journalism is the way to go. And I really did love journalism. I love storytelling. I love meeting people. And it was an awesome career. For about 15 years, I worked across this country and in a couple of different communities and loved it. But there, journalism was really affected at that point with people, get layoffs. There's just less and less money for newsrooms.
Yes. Yeah. Actually, I'm just reading Craig Oliver's autobiography, which is
Yeah.
very interesting. So that you mentioned that, and he spent, obviously a time in Ottawa. He's from the West originally,
Yeah.
but I'd wonder if your dad would say social media is the place to be if he was a mayor today.
Right. Maybe he's not even on it. Funny story about Craig Oliver. They used to have to put a light on the camera because his eyesight was so bad.
Yes,
He didn't
yes,
know where the
yes.
camera was, and so I was actually at
Yeah,
shoots where they had,
I'd heard about that about him. Very sad, and it's nice to see his daughter now is on the national CTV. But
yeah.
okay, so now you land in Kitchener Waterloo as a reporter. How do you come to Kitchener Waterloo as a reporter? Was this an upgrade from where you were before, or what happened?
Yeah, I mean, Larry Rose was the news director in Kitchener, and he was arguably one of the best news directors across this country. Like, he was the one you wanted to work for. He worked at the National for a really long time, and they said, what do you want to do at the end of your career? And he said, I want to manage just a nice little news station, and he loved Kitchener.
Right.
Waterloo, and so he ended up running this news station. He was so smart. He had so many good ideas. He just was an incredible.
So he was smart enough to hire you.
Well, I was really grateful enough to get hired by him. Let me put it that way. And it wasn't the first time I applied either, Rob. I applied many times to Kitchener Waterloo. This was a great station. It had an amazing reputation in this country. So
Okay.
I knew that I wanted to come here. And I don't know, this is like old names here, but James McDonald and I, he was the old reporter from these. So for those people who can remember back those days, this has been 2000-ish. We had worked in Sudbury CTV together, and he was working down here, and he's like, it's an awesome station. You've got to come here.
Well, Jim Alexander was a resident of Ayr. So when I moved to Ayr, I got to know him there. So so he's an interesting character too.
Awesome guy. Yeah.
So you come to Kitchener Waterloo as a reporter, and you're on the local municipal scene, right? That's sort of your foray into local politics.
Yeah, I always loved to cover municipal politics. When I was in Sudbury, they did their big amalgamation, and I really caught the municipal politics bug at that point. I loved covering council. I loved understanding, the budgeting processes, how things were getting done, right? Because as a citizen, you often look, and even as a reporter, you're constantly questioning, why are things taking so long? Like, what are they doing there? It just feels like, they're stuck in bureaucracy. So I got the bug, and that was sort of one of my specialties. I loved covering politics. Yeah.
Well, I remember when I was mayor, or more so as regional councillor, and you'd have the local Kitchener Waterloo media contacting you. So people back then that I remember most prominently would be like Paige Desmond, who did a great job, and Jeff Outhit. And you always were cautious whenever you were talking, because those people really did their homework, knew what was in the agendas, probably read the reports even better than many of the politicians. And I'm sure you probably had that similar experience in terms of your quote homework that you would do to prep yourself for what was coming up.
Yeah, Friday was my favorite day. The agendas dropped online where you could go to, back in the day. I mean, I was working in politics long enough that we'd go to the clerk's office to pick up the media packages, which were the agendas, the staff reports. So I'd get those either delivered, or I'd have to, a photographer would pick them up, and I'd start to go through them, look for the stories, call the politicians. What are you interested in right now? What's happening in your ward? And so, yeah, that was my jam. I loved it.
I won't say you need a social life, because I'm sure that's been remedied since. But so tell me though, because that in our talks earlier, that sort of led to your entry into politics, right? What you were observing. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, when I first dropped here, Rim Park had just dropped, and I literally, I mean, you can't see my hands right now, but it was like a massive report that came down talking about, what went wrong, what went right.
That was about a foot of reports you were showing with your hands.
And basically I started in July, and that report was just coming out, and they're like, read it and report on it. So talk about learning about a city really fast. And then from there, and it was an all-male council at that point in Waterloo. It was, I think it was 6 men. Kitchener's pretty similar. I think they had 1 woman on their council, and just looking at this city that was really progressive. I mean, Blackberry was the unicorn in the world.
Yep.
And, there were like coming from cities like Sudbury and Winnipeg that I'd been working in previously, the mining was definitely going down. And I came to the city and it was just, there was more money. I remember my first time I interviewed Mike Lazaridis, and he was giving $1 million. And I did the Austin Powers $1 million and didn't get it. And it was really embarrassing. But anyway, so I just like, it was such
maybe he needed a social life, but anyway, go ahead.
He's so smart. But anyway,
yes.
So I think I was sort of struck by how, the power players, because as a journalist, you're interviewing those people on a regular basis. And it was a lot of older white men. And I don't want to sound discriminatory against that. I felt like this city wasn't really showcasing who was actually living in it.
No, you raise a good point. First off, on Mike Lazaridis, my own story was I met him in 1986 when he was just him and 6 other guys above that, that plaza on Herb Street across from the old liquor store.
Yeah.
On the second floor of that's where their offices were at one point at that time. I should have asked him for a job. I would have been employee number 8. But anyway, we all have stories like that.
He's retired in Malaga right now.
Yeah. But you know what? You raise a good point because, and this is what I found too when I decided to run, was that I didn't feel the council. In that case, it wasn't a matter of reflecting the community, but I didn't feel they were really involved in the community. And sometimes, though, as you say, the community is growing at one pace and doing things in the world, and yet the council is still kind of stuck. And if they're not really aware of what's happening or participating in that or not reflecting that, then they're not really keeping up with what the community needs to get done, from their council.
So, typically as a journalist, when you're covering council, you're there to cover outcomes. And I did feel, and Terry Pender was actually the municipal reporter for the Record at that time. There was a lot of deferring things to another meeting. And I remember turning to Terry at one point and just saying, like, another deferral? Like we were constantly struck by that this was the way that these councils worked. And we know in the private world, you make decisions, you move forward.
Right.
And I think I started to see like, why are they afraid to, like, what's happening here? Why can't they move business forward? And I think there's a part of me too, as a feminist, was thinking that we need more women here. When I moved to this community, I've only ever lived in Uptown. And so I really loved this community. I saw the growth that was happening while I was a journalist. The public square went from a parking lot into a public square. And I started to see, like, there's so much more that we can do.
Right.
Growing up in Ottawa, where it was like, how can we make this a community and not a federal government city?
This is interesting. It makes me think, because we're talking about just prior to 2010. So we're not talking like 1960 or 1970, right? In terms of not making decisions. And so you've got this Waterloo that's almost like two sides. You got the conservative insurance industry sort of thing, stayed conservative, move slow. And then you've got the tech side, which is like, go, make decisions. Let's go, let's make things happen. And so you've got it's almost a clash of two worlds that's happening in 2010. And you're observing these councillors, the mayor and the councillors at the time, are not really moving with the times, is what you're sensing.
And we're talking about amalgamation. We're talking about LRT. Like, those were the biggest topics happening in 2010. I mean, we never actually, didn't move forward with amalgamation, but definitely move forward with the LRT. So we knew the city was growing. There was a bigger vision for what we were going to be. We knew we had to do something, but we also just felt like, I mean, if you guys remember, the LRT debate took a really long time. Like, I think I covered it for 4 years. And then when I got into council, it was another 3 years that we were continuing to move forward with it. So
I'm doing a podcast. I'm doing multiple podcasts with Mike Murray. So as you observed, it's a long time. It's multiple podcasts to get it all in. So
truth, right? Yeah. So imagine the citizens here, right? Like, and you had to do your due diligence, and for a lot of it, I understand.
But Ion and LRT is not really, like, it's a Waterloo interest for sure, but it's a regional decision. But you're seeing other decisions at the first tier level, we'll say, that aren't happening as quick as you feel they should be happening, right?
Yeah, there was deferrals on like buildings. When the vote should have happened, they defer it off. There was a lot of like questions to staff, come back with this so we can learn more.
Nothing more frustrating for developers than the delay. Probably one of the biggest complaints from developers is the feeling that things just bog down and it's like no man's land or the Bermuda Triangle trying to get anything done.
Yeah. And I think that was a big thing. Like I mean, I'm not scared of growth and change. And I really wanted to see that happen in this city. And I think I just kind of got caught up in that momentum and really wanted to see, let's make some big changes. Tell me,
having grown up in Ottawa, and you know, and Ottawa is a fabulous place with lots of things going on and that sort of thing. Did you see like that there was a potential in Waterloo for what was the sort of thing happening in Ottawa? Was part of your thinking?
You know, you sort of take what you grow up with, and Ottawa's is a university town, 2 universities. It's got a college. There's a lot of similarities between the communities. You know, they've got the canal. I used to always talk about Laurel Creek and Grand River, you know, and one of the things I always wanted to put the water back in Waterloo. So really get, you know, showcasing the waterways we have here. So, you know, I do think that it absolutely made an impression on the things I wanted to see.
Put the water in lieu. But anyway, go ahead. But so, okay, now you're watching all this, you reach a point, and what do?
So the first thing was Ian McLean was the sitting councillor at that point, and
in Uptown.
In Uptown.
Yeah.
And he and I used to hang out at a little hot yoga studio in Belmont Village. It was called Bikram at the time. And after a very sweaty class, we were walking out together, drinking our smoothies. And he had kind of offhandedly mentioned that he wasn't going to run again. And it was that was that seed where I thought, you know, and I was getting burnt out at CTV. You know, I had 2 young children. The news was far different from when I started. I was, you know, I was doing my own camera work, and I didn't see that changing at all. And I think I was just ready at that point, as a lot of women are after they have children, are looking for a career change because their current career doesn't fit where they are.
So you were prepared to give up your career as a reporter to be a councillor full time.
Yeah, well, and it's a part-time councillor in Waterloo.
I know. The pay is part-time, but we all know it's full-time work. But you were prepared to, before really knowing that. Well, you knew somewhat from your dad, but in his experiences. But so you're looking at a career change. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, and so from that point, and that would have been the spring. And so I started to talk to a few people and ask them, you know, their opinions. And, you know, as a journalist, you're really fortunate to be able to have access to a lot of people. And I, you know, totally know the privilege I had there, but started to make some phone calls, set myself up on a schedule, was doing 2 coffee meetings a week to chat with people about my intentions and what I was thinking about and what they wanted.
So you did a little exploratory phase before you actually announced you were going to run.
Absolutely, Rob. I mean,
I did the same thing when I ran for regional chair.
Yeah. I was chatting with people, and then it became pretty apparent in the summer that like, I'm going to do this. Like, I can no longer keep my cards this close to my chest. I'm going to do it. But
let me, before you get to the announcement part, tell me about so we know you're a reporter, but tell me about your community involvement in Waterloo in the years prior.
Well, I mean, I had an amazing group of women who were all having babies at the same time as me in Uptown Waterloo. It's a little known group, but I'll give them a shout out, the Norman Street Moms. They're kind of famous in Uptown.
Norman Street Mob, but anyway.
Street Moms, yeah. And that was my social group. We all had young children, you know, once a month on a Friday, we'd all get together at somebody's house and have some drinks and appetizers, but it was really great. And I really got to sink into a community, which, you know, as a journalist, you often try to you don't want to put down roots because you're going to move again. But at that point, after kids, I was like, we'd bought a house in the neighborhood. And so I started to get those roots, and I really started to think, and you know, so much of the time we're out walking around and there's construction happening, and my son was obsessed with bulldozers and dump trucks. And so I would end up on many occasions sitting in front of the Park Street getting torn up and put back together again. And I think I just started to realize, like, one of the greatest skills that I had was communication. And one of the skills that I feel was really missing between City Hall and the people was telling people what was happening there. There was a real
Yeah.
disconnect.
Right. Right.
And you know, as a journalist, you just naturally go, oh yeah, well, I can tell you about this. And you almost,
Right.
you know, you're always telling people what's happening because it's just part of your job.
So you were seen as the go-to person to find out what's happening. But you know, it's interesting point that
I'm
you,
not even in either of those jobs anymore.
because you're so well connected. But it's interesting, that observation, because it was sort of when I first ran too, was I felt there was a disconnect between council and the community, and you know, people not really knowing what's going on. But more on my end, it was more council being aware of what was happening in the community. I just didn't feel that they were connected or involved. And you know, when a mayor doesn't know the name, here's a small town thing for you. When a mayor doesn't know the name of your local pharmacist, that's a problem.
Right? Yeah. And it's the same thing here in the sense that, like, you know, there's a parking lot not too far from Norman Street where, you know, we'd heard something been improved, but no one was sure, you couldn't find it. So, you know, I think there were things like people were getting frustrated because, you know, we're hearing, and then, you know, you read the paper and it's like Waterloo, you know, is exploding with development. But then we look around and we're like, it's not really happening. Like, so there was a disconnect, and you know, that was really the main platform I ran on, was communications. Like,
yeah, I mean, we're seeing an explosion now, but certainly back then it's sort of like there was a lot of talk, but not a lot of action on that aspect. Okay, so let's jump then to the summer, and you decide to announce. Now you're putting a now. I'm going to say, like, I've done a number of podcasts, right? And I talk to a lot of people about running and stuff. And a lot of times they're individuals who have been involved in community organizations, and then they run, and they don't really have much of a team. It's not like a provincial or federal campaign. But I'm going to guess that you had a very organized campaign. Tell me about it.
I took it really seriously. I mean, I literally took a leave of absence because I couldn't work.
Well, okay. First off, look, everyone takes it seriously, but you had you put something together like a campaign,
a full-time job. So we set up headquarters in my garage in my house, just outside my house. I printed off every single polling station in Uptown Ward 7. There's 7 of them. Yep. Then I zoomed those maps out and created, you know, so to go street level. So I set myself up with 6 weeks of door knocking. Mm-hmm. And so I would just go into my garage and I'd pull out the names of the people on that street, and then I just go and I tick them off. Yep. I had a chief financial officer, so someone who was managing my finances. I had a volunteer coordinator, a science coordinator. What else? I had a full-time employee working, just doing phone calls during the day.
Holy Lordy.
Yeah. My husband took over signs. You know, you always got to find a job for the husband. And then we had like 40 to 50 volunteers that were with me on any given.
Yeah, so that's a lot of coordination, because, you know, anyone who's been involved in a provincial or federal campaign will understand that there is an organization, because year in and year out, you usually have a local organization that meets and they're ready to go, and you've got a provincial, like national or provincial campaign that helps with the local riding associations and developing policy and stuff. But you don't get that at the municipal level. You get individuals who are running that don't necessarily have that experience, but you've put together quite an organization. But I want to ask you, the other side of it that's always lacking is policy, trying to find out what someone's policies are about, right? So what did you do on the policy end of things?
Well, it's interesting. So my husband was working at WCI as a history teacher at the time. And one of the most well-touted history teachers, he was the department head, was a guy named Brent Pavey. And he is a political wonk if there ever was one. And he came on as my campaign manager, and he knew exactly what he was doing. He knew the community well. He taught in the community for close to 30 years. And so he was just awesome. And so the two of us sat down about a week or two before, we officially launched, and really thought about what can I bring to Waterloo? Because I think, a big part of it is you're asking people to hire you for a job, and you're asking them to hire you for a job for 4 years, whether you're good or not. So I really wanted to come forward with something that I felt like I could actually make this community better. So what does that look like? So, I mean, a big thing at this point, and as a journalist, I knew, was Rim Park was a massive scandal in Waterloo region. It changed the way our bureaucracy worked in Waterloo. They were very risk adverse. And we still had lawsuits hanging over our head in 2010 from a scandal that had happened years and years before that. So, I mean, the first pillar is probably the most boring pillar, but was one of the most important ones to me, which was get our financial house in order. We had one of the highest debts out of all the cities in our region. And we had lawsuits hanging over our head.
And you know what? One of the benefits for you is having been a reporter, you would have been immersed in all of the budgets and all that stuff beforehand, which a lot of people who run don't necessarily have that exposure. So when you say that, I can see why, because when I ran, I said that too, but I really didn't know what I was talking about. I just threw that down. So sometimes that's a common one. But let me just ask you this. This is the thing, and we'll get into the other ones, but I remember Ken Sealing saying it, and Brian Stortz has said this to me too. When I first ran it, Brian and I are old friends, and so I chatted with him, and he said, well, why do you want to run? It's almost like that elevator pitch. Why is it you want to run? For me, it was getting a community center built so we had better facilities for our kids and people and seniors in the community, a growing community. And so was there that elevator pitch that you had, sort of that 30-second or whatever it is, you know what I'm talking about, pitch for why you ran?
Absolutely. And I think financial house in order was definitely a big part of that. And while that may not connect with every single person at the door, I feel like it was an important part of having that financial background to be able, like, I've covered every budget at every city at the region. I understand the budget process. I mean, once I got in, I realized, wow, there's a way more to it than I thought, but nevertheless, I had covered it.
Yeah. Everybody has that feeling, trust me.
And Uptown Waterloo, I was really passionate about small businesses, about our economy, about growth. And, the writing was on the wall. We knew that if we, at least I felt this way, that we had to start to intensify and the places to grow legislation that had come out really was starting to put some pressure on some towns. Waterloo was this cute little town that still had banners saying, welcome to Harvest Fest. Like, there was just this real disconnect of, like, are we a small town? And I think there were quite a few people in this community who wanted to keep us in this small town.
Sure. Change is tough. Change is tough for people. Absolutely.
There was a large majority of us who were like, no, we're the home of BlackBerry. We've got the University of Waterloo, one of the top universities in the world here. Like, we're moving forward, and we need to change this town into a city, and we need to act like that. I think that was one of the biggest pitches I had, was that, it's a fresh perspective. I'm coming here with new eyes. And, I think another big part of it is I'm not afraid of growth. Let's move forward.
So you didn't feel that the council was demonstrating enough progressiveness. And also too, it's sort of like this no mentality, no to things that you were observing. Yeah. Go to know. That's how you describe what you were observing.
Well, yeah. And I think, it's hard to, because now when I'm looking back, all the kind of years get mashed together, and boy, did I learn a lot once I got in. And so I think that taints my perspective when I look back on it. But that said, I do think, it felt like we were this metropolis that was just about to bloom, if you will. Yeah. And we just needed some vision to get there. And I'm not arrogant enough to think I was the person to do it, but you need someone to help lead, get the right.
It's part of a wave. I mean, I think we're going to talk about this later, but you're going to tell us, and I know you can't do it on your own, right? So obviously it's not one person, but at this time, was this the Waterloo Inc. years that we always used to hear about, just like prior to you getting in? Was that sort of how the mentality in Waterloo?
It was actually, I came in after that, but what I came into was this fear of risk, because Rim Park was a risk. They took it. And then obviously, with the interest payments and everything that the bait and switch that happened,
Yeah.
Waterloo was saddled with a massive debt that it still pays off today. They're still paying it off today.
I was at university with the sales rep from MFP.
Okay.
That's how close. That's how small world this is.
It is.
Played hockey with him at Laurier for a brief time too. But
Good.
okay, so you post on the on your website your policy platform. You've got a
Yeah.
platform. You've got a team. Tell us about who you're running against in this in your first election.
So I had to wait to the very last day to put my name in.
Oh, how come?
Is Labor Day. Well, I was about to lose my entire income. So I had to take a leave of absence for CTV for those 6 weeks.
Oh,
and
okay.
so I wanted to work up to the last moment so that I could, put a little bit of money in the bank to,
Yep.
to
Understood.
tide me over.
Totally fair.
So for me, like there was no, and I don't know if anybody would have been scared off by me putting my name in, but there were some people who put their names in that scared me a little bit. So the first one out of the gate was Peter Wollstonecroft, the former mayor's husband.
Yeah.
And at that time, he was one of my main people I would go to talk politics.
Oh, very well known conservative and political commentator
Yeah.
in the local municipality. Yeah, absolutely.
Community guy. Yeah. So that was a bit nerve wracking. Duncan McLean, who was Ian McLean's twin brother, put his name in and he was running. Erin Epp, and I'm not sure if she's related to Herb Epp. Herb Epp actually did help me on my campaign, so I don't think they were related, but same last name. So that was one. There was a guy named Edwin Laria, and he had run for the NDP. I'd covered quite a few of his campaigns, running for the MDP locally. And so, I mean, I knew him. I knew he was a well-known member.
Yeah.
Tends to be a little bit, well, it depends where you are, but uptown, especially on the east side, tends to be a little NDP.
Yeah.
Westbound is a bit more conservative.
So one of the things about municipal politics is you don't, I mean, to me, the nice thing is you don't have party affiliation. So you're free to do, you're maverick, you go do what you want to do, working with others, and we'll talk about that. But in here, certainly if you're affiliated with a party, that party apparatus can come out to help you on a local municipal scene. And so you're up against some heavyweight conservatives, some brand names in Waterloo, and some people with backing from others. So you've got one hell of a challenge here.
Yeah, it was a bit scary putting my name in because I think, you're not really thinking about it. I actually called my dad when I saw Duncan put his name in. I was like, oh my gosh. And, he talked me down and he said simply like, doesn't matter who you're running against. It matters, do you want the job? Can you do a good job? And I was like, yeah, I know I can. And so it started to make the competition feel a little less. I actually really enjoyed the campaign. I loved going to the debates. I have a ton of respect for Duncan and for Peter.
Yeah.
And Erin, she was young, she was a student. She ran an awesome campaign.
Oh, good
so,
for her.
it was a ton of fun. I mean, I did get a little bit nervous, but as the campaign progressed and I saw, the signs, I remember being at one event where it was just Peter and I that showed up, and it was an older age residence. And it was sort of like a meet and greet the candidates. Only Peter and I showed up. And I realized that, they're older. So they go and they sit down at their tables and you actually have to walk around. So I thought, well, it's easier if I go stand at the door and I greet every one of them with some campaign literature when they walk in the door. And I remember Peter was sort of at the other end, sort of doing the and he looked over at me and not even a minute later, he was right beside me. And I was that moment, I was like, okay, I'm doing all right on my own. My instincts are putting me in the right places.
Good for you.
I'm meeting the right people. And so,
Well, you said you set it up in your garage and you had all the wards or all the polling stations within the ward set up. And my old friend Ross Kelterborn, who was a former mayor in Wellesley, right? We get together all the time. And sometimes people in the local area, when they want to run, they give Ross a call and ask him for some tips. And Ross will always say the number one thing is make sure you knock on every door. And sometimes people say, people who are running say, well, maybe people don't want to see us at the door or whatever. No, sure. Sometimes for some people, it might feel like who's bothering me at 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock. But, you got to go knock on the doors. Would you agree that was probably one of the important parts of your campaign?
Oh, 100%. I would door knock. It was a full-time job for me. And the one of the little hacks that I had was, my dad told me to do this, was, I had all of Ward 7. And so I would door knock and I separated everything into, like, so it was poll 7-1, and then it would be A, B, C, D, E, because I could do a letter at one point. And so I would do A and B in one poll, and then I jump over to like Ward 7, 6 poll, and I do C, D, E. And the idea between that is, like, if anybody ever was talking or at, the local coffee shop, they would be like, oh yeah, Melissa door knocked me. And they were like, Melissa door knocked me. So it was like, I was all
like on the same night, she was like all over the place. This woman's
That's
everywhere.
Right. Yes. So I did that all the time.
She's a machine.
It was nice too, because you sort of split it up as well. Like, you kind of, you hit a couple of streets and then you get into a different zone. I think for me, that was probably, that's the most fun, is meeting people.
Yeah.
You never know what's going to show up at a door.
I love that. So two things. The first I want to ask you, what was the number one issue that popped up? Think about this for a sec. What was the number one issue, and it kind of maybe surprised you, that popped up all the time when you were knocking on doors?
Oh, easy, Rob. Traffic calming.
Exactly. Speeding, traffic calming. Number one issue for everybody. They don't talk about property. Well, maybe in Waterloo because of RIM, but they don't usually bring up property taxes. They talk about speeding and their pet got run over. I know for me out in the country, the very first place I knocked on was a settlement area, sort of a country road sort of thing, 20 homes around. So people walk up and down the road to visit each other. Yeah. And I knocked on the first door and they said they'd lost 3 cats that year because of cars speeding in their area, which was very sad. And I thought, oh, wow. And then everywhere I went, speeding was an issue. Yeah. And isn't it always, as you learn later, it's really your neighbors who are doing the speeding. It's not like some random, it's not some random young youth with a hot rod Mustang burning through your neighborhood.
There was one guy who lived in Uptown West, and he was I think he was a former lawyer, he was a teacher, and he was always just so hard to work with, like not negotiating, like always coming at me like I was the bad guy. I wasn't doing all of this stuff. And I'm not even joking, about a month or two ago, I was walking up Herbert Street. And a car blows the stop sign at Allen and Herbert. It's a little Porsche. And I look at it, and isn't it that guy? Blowing a stop sign in Uptown. And that guy was after me all the time for speed bumps.
Yes. See?
Street.
You know what?
He led that charge. And then I saw him blow red stop. And honestly, I walked in my house. I was like, are you kidding me? Like, I had to tell somebody.
You know what I take from that story? You know what I take from that story? Lawyers are the worst. That's what I take from that story.
But no, traffic was an issue. And so like some of the women I know were organizing events where I would come and we'd have coffee and cheese and I would talk to them about what I wanted to do in the community. I think that was a big thing too, because I was one of them, like we kind of joke about that soccer mom vote, but there weren't a lot of moms younger, not that I was young, but I had children later, but that you could associate with and say, hey, here's the things that matter to me today.
Yeah. I loved those coffee chats. I did about a dozen coffee chats, and they were always fun because it's people in the area, about a dozen people or so, and you're just sitting down talking about issues. And the nice thing about it is, then they go tell 5 friends, I met with, we talked about, they're like your apostles or disciples who now are out there in the community, right? Ambassadors out there. Okay, so the other thing is, so as you're door knocking, you're identifying voters, right? And keeping track of the people who say they're going to vote for you, correct? Yeah.
It was funny, Rob, because when you called me to do this podcast, I opened up this gigantic Tupperware container that has all my stuff, and it's getting musty now. But I was pulling out some of the sheets, and some of them were wet because it was raining some days. And so, you can tell with my chicken scratches. We had every kind of weather during our campaign. But so every single time I would have, the 3 or 4 streets I was hitting. And every time I knocked on someone's door, I would write, they're a maybe, they're a yes, they're a sign, whatever, what
Yeah.
the other thing too, which was actually, I think, because I was really building this communications platform, is if they had a question. So, I think I started actually being the city councillor while I was a candidate, because people, I remember talking to someone and that was just across from the barrel yards, and they're like, I can't get a hold of anybody at the city. They're not helping me out about this. So I was like, give me your name and number. And then I connected them to the right person. So,
and you created a newsletter too out of all these emails that you were collecting during the campaign, which I think is really smart.
Yeah, on Friday. And e-newsletters were sort of a new thing in 2010. I know now we have way too many in our inboxes.
Oh, but you're right. You're right. It shouldn't have been. It should have been an old thing, but people just aren't quick to adapt. But I agree with you. Yeah.
One of my campaign promises is that I would do a monthly newsletter to people so that they would always know what was happening in their ward. I didn't want, that to me was a big promise, and you're not supposed to make promises, but that was one of my pledges.
Yeah. No, well, you got to stand for something.
Yeah, right. But I started early by doing a weekly newsletter, even during my campaign. So come and meet me out here, or if you want a door knock, if you want a sign, or here's some of the stuff. And I went to every single council meeting while I was
good for you. Let me ask you, did your dad come down and help you out?
Oh yeah, he was like one of my best campaigners, honestly.
Oh, nice. That's nice. What's his first name? Is it Bob?
Jim Durrell.
Sorry, Jim. Yeah, Jim Durrell. So it's nice. Big Jim came down to help his little girl out.
Yeah, we actually hit some of the harder ones. So we went into the Wollstonecroft territory and the territory. I brought my dad along with me on
the Westmount? Is that the Westmount parts?
Westmount, Stanley, all in those streets. So Dad helped me out on those ones. People were everyone was really kind. And, some people would say, obviously, they're my neighbor, or they're my best friend, or they're related to me, whatever. Totally get it. Just want you to know that I'm running as well. And,
Now let's talk about signs for a second. So you had signs out all over the place, but you have an interesting story near the end of the campaign about a house. Okay. So why don't you tell us about that?
The last night before the campaign. So I was out and my parents were visiting, and we finished dinner. And, for anybody who's ever run there, it's like you have butterflies in your belly that whole last day, because it's almost completely out of your control at that point.
Yeah.
And I was anxious. And so I actually turned to everybody. It was probably like 6:30 after dinner. And I said, I'm just going to go out and do 3 more hours. Because you at 9 o'clock, you kind of got to start.
Yeah, no, you don't want to go past 9. People are scared you're stalking them or something.
Yeah. Knocking on the door. So I went out and I hit an area that I didn't have a ton of signs on. It was on the other side of Union, sort of on that Kitchener-Waterloo border. And I went back out and I was door knocking along that street, and I didn't have a ton of signs out there. So I didn't think I had a ton of supporters, but I still just wanted to door knock them one last time, remind them to vote. We did 3 pieces of lit. So the first was just a postcard to introduce myself. The second had my platform in it. And the third one, which we hit every door in Uptown Waterloo on that last weekend, was here's where you vote. So don't forget to vote. And here's where you're voting. So we printed off those for everybody. And if you need help getting to voting, we can supply rides or blah, blah, blah.
Right. Yep.
So we'd hit everyone. And so I had a couple more. So I was just going out to do those last doors, and I knocked on a door and they had somebody else's sign on it. Yep. And so I smiled when they opened it, and it was dark at this point, because it would have been like October, I guess, at that point. So it was dark outside, and I said hi, and I was actually by myself, which you shouldn't do when you're campaigning, but we all do it. I said, I know you've got somebody else's sign on your door. It's voting tomorrow. I just want to make sure that you get out to vote. And they said, we're voting for you. We feel bad. We don't want to take this sign off, but you got our vote. And so, I'd hit like 6 or 7 doors on Moore Street that didn't have my signs on it, but all of them were telling me like, no, I'm voting for Durrell. Like they were.
Oh, wow. So that gives you a really good indication.
I was like, if these signs are, and I know I had more signs than anybody else at that point.
Yeah.
So if my signs vote and other people's signs are voting for me,
yeah,
I think I've got this. And I went home that night. I actually slept, which most people don't sleep the night before the voting day. And I got up that next day, and I felt amazing. Like I just felt so positive.
Yeah.
Whether win or lose, I was like, there is nothing else I could have done today.
Yeah,
So
so that's just like for me with the law practice when you're at trial and it goes to the jury. So you've put everything out there, and at that point it's out of your hands and the jury to decide. So it's the electorate to decide. How many times did you knock on doors? Like how many times did you reach homes? Did you reach everybody once, 1.5 times? What do you think you did?
So Uptown has two polling stations that are in Laurier and basically Waterloo. So, and big part of my campaign platform didn't talk about this, but it was one of the things that I really started to work on, which was rental housing. And I was door knocking on some of these students' doors, and there was like 10 kids in a 3-4 bedroom. Someone showed me they were sleeping beside a furnace. So, but I will, students don't tend to vote. So I did hit all those doors. I didn't go back a second time, but it did actually change the way I was thinking about some of the things I wanted to get. And
let me ask you just quick. We don't want to get into this point, but
yeah.
was this the rental licensing issue that came up?
Yep.
Later on. Okay, we're gonna talk about that at a future show because we are going to be doing another show. But I'm doing a podcast with Yvonne Fernandez, and that was an issue that she dealt with in Conestoga. Yeah. So okay, go ahead. Sorry, continue on.
I mean, it was the student ghetto. Jeff Henry.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that more later. I don't want to divert, so go back to your campaigning.
So, but typically, those 3 and 4, they were called the polling stations 3 and 4, had really low voter turnout. Like we're talking 7%, 13%.
Yeah.
Whereas Westmount, Uptown West, Mary Allen, there was a portion of McGregor. Like I knew those people were going to get. In fact, to this day, Uptown has one of the highest voting percentages in anywhere in Waterloo region. So it was really important for me to get to those doors more than once. So I did sort of, everybody got the first, hello, I'm running.
Yeah.
And then I would take my bigger piece of literature, and that was where I was actually meeting people and handing that out.
Okay.
Yeah. And then that last weekend, we hit everybody one last time, but we did focus on the places.
So you had the first phase was the drop.
Yeah.
The second phase was the knock and drop. So, knock on the door, talk to them. And then the third phase was, again, a drop. And where you said you need a ride to the poll, all that kind of stuff in that third piece. Yeah. So that's pretty good coverage.
It was, I mean, I think that was definitely one of the reasons why people that, when you're on their doorstep, you talk to them, you're an easy human being to reach. I think people kind of knew me as a reporter, as accessible, but plus in Uptown, I shopped in Uptown. I grocery shop here. I hang out with the moms. Like, it's not like
I guess, thinking about it too, we shouldn't discount the fact that you were on the news a lot. So people were familiar with your name as well as these other names. So this was quite the name recognition campaign here going on. Yeah. So, and you were that trusted voice, that trusted face.
Thank you, Rob. That was part of my platform.
So election day, what did you do on election day?
So woke up, my dad was giving rides to lovely seniors all day. I went and voted with my husband and then came home. I think I tried to sleep. I couldn't eat. And then we had all of our scrutineers show up at about 6 or 7 o'clock. So they went off to all of the polling stations. And basically,
let me ask you, during the day, were you calling your list?
Yeah.
So you had your team of people calling.
People and myself who were calling people to remind them to vote, leaving messages.
Yes.
Oh, I also did something a little controversial, Rob, where I bought a machine. So, it's the one that's like, hi, this is Melissa Durrell. I just want to remind you, it was like a recorded message.
Yeah.
Every phone. And I actually had a woman call me that day and say, I'm not voting for you now. And I was like, oh, I'm sorry to feel that way. But, it was just sort of like, one last, just want to remind you. Was
that sort of a robocall kind of concept?
Yeah.
So
and I think I was one of the few people who did it, but.
So you did that on your own, or did you? There's services that do that as well.
I hired a service to do it for me.
Yeah. On election day. Eh? Okay, interesting. Would you recommend that today?
I do. I would. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, I would. I think it's good. I do. They hear from you, your voice.
Yeah.
And, I mean, I know.
Now you also, I'm trying to remember now, did you mention sign locations near polling stations or anything like that?
That was another thing we did.
So this is the Melissa Durrell campaign tactics. I'll say.
My tips. So when we first got, we were told where people would be voting. that day I went out to all of the homes that are across the street from where people would vote and secured a sign there with the homeowner. And then that weekend before the vote, we went through and put our largest signs on in front of every.
So you swapped them out. You swapped the small signs out for the big sign.
Yeah, we did. Because, at that point too, it is about, I hope that I'd met everyone and that they trusted me and that they wanted to vote for me. But, there are a ton of people that are walking into that polling booth. Right. And they're not sure. Maybe they're coming out because they're voting for against fluoride or for against having discussions with Kitchener. You don't know what's driving them. Maybe
we should mention that this is 2010 and there were two referendum questions on the poll. One was fluoride or not fluoride in the water. And the other, which is always interesting, is do you want to have a discussion?
Yeah.
And in case for Waterloo, it'd be, do you want to have a discussion with the city of Kitchener? Yeah. Or should there be discussions between the two about amalgamation? That was just, do you want a discussion? Not even do you support amalgamation or not? It was, do you want a discussion? Yeah. And so let me ask you that during the campaign.
No commitment, just a little bit of gray area there.
Wow. So the fluoride question, did that come up a lot during the campaign?
No, not really. It was kind of in Uptown, I really didn't hear much about it at all. It was brought up in debates. It was a question that was often asked in, in the Rogers debate, etc. I think there's a community center debate. But door knocking, it wasn't hitting doors at all. I wasn't hitting it at doors at all. Amalgamation was for sure.
Okay, hold on. Let me ask you on fluoride. What was your position on fluoride?
Yeah, so for fluoride, it was interesting because I covered it as a reporter. So I had spoken to both sides, and as a journalist, you give both sides equal coverage. And so for me, it was this is, get the best information out there that's possible and make your own decision. That was sort of where I was coming from. I think I was still very much in that journalistic perspective, give people the information and they can make their decisions.
Make their own decision.
Be nonpartisan around it.
Well, it was 50.1% opposed. Was it to take out the fluoride? Yeah.
There's no fluoride in the water in Waterloo anymore.
The only thing closer than that was the Quebec referendum decision.
Amalgamation was one of the things. I think it's because Uptown is so close to downtown Kitchener. And I also think too, in Uptown, we were starting to see the community was shifting. And so this weird idea that, you blink and you're in a different city, or I have quite a few residents, their backyards are in Kitchener and their front yards are in Waterloo. So, we, in this area, it was very much, I think, conversations could be had. I still strongly believe that we should be, there's far more efficiencies that can be had. I worry as an urbanite, I call myself, if we did amalgamate, would most of the economic development dollars go to downtown Kitchener, therefore choking out Uptown Waterloo? And so there is a little part of me that does like the fact that we have that separation because it's allowed Uptown to grow. And
you have the ability to make some local decisions but still collaborate on a region-wide basis, which happens a fair bit, right? And as a reporter, you went through you said the Sudbury amalgamations, right? That you witnessed that. And
the end where they amalgamated everybody together.
Yeah, and generally the general view is amalgamations aren't easy forced marriages, and that's the only way they happen. And there's a lot of disruption. That's probably, did you observe that when you're in Sudbury?
In Sudbury, their budget was, I don't think I can swear on this one, right? There's no E on your podcast. It was a gong show. We'll put it that way. There was people who were former mayors of towns are now councillors. And so there's ego, there's money, there's where's this going to go? And, that independence they once had no longer exists. Ottawa went through the same thing, they had amalgamated. It was a shock to me that Waterloo region hadn't got done, because I'd seen it and experienced it in several different cities. And then to come here and be like, man, Elizabeth Whitmer is the GOAT.
That's exactly.
That's what I think.
Rumor has it, yes. I think all fingers point in that direction. Absolutely. So so you weren't surprised then by the outcome of that vote in Waterloo, where they said we don't want to have that conversation?
I wasn't. I think, we're still, and I'm glad at this point, we had the largest development, the Barrel Yards development, the largest brownfield urban development was happening in Waterloo. So we were adding 2,000 plus new people into uptown urban Waterloo.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, we had at least another 10 buildings that were thought about, properties were being assembled. There was a question like, one of the first things I did was sit down with the
okay, well, we're not going to talk about what you did. Okay, we're still talking about the election. So
okay, so
we're going to go back to the election for a sec. So scrutineers, you mentioned scrutineers, because that's not common for municipal candidates to have. I had scrutineers because, again, I had a political background, and first thing I did was I sent scrutineers out. And you had an experience which was similar to mine, the scrutineers are people that go out, observe the vote, and then they can report back to you what the outcome of the vote was, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
and also their
voter list.
Yeah. Yes.
They
Go
have
ahead.
my voter list where I know these people have said, yes, they're going to vote for me.
Yeah.
And so they're seeing that they've come in. So they're checking off people as they come in.
Right.
So at this point, I know I have to have, I need to get this many votes in this polling station in order for me to win that poll.
Yeah, so, or you want to get all the identified voters out. And so the scrutineer can go call people who haven't voted yet, right?
Yeah. And they call back to us and say, we're missing these people right now. So then we would do it. Yeah.
Yeah, make a call. And the nice thing then is the scrutineers now, in this case, the scrutineers and then when the polls close, they can stay inside, observe the vote and the count, and then they get the number and call you back. So what happened election night?
Yeah, so we knew before everybody else that we had won. My scrutineers had called back in, and we had 1 through 7 polling stations, and we knew, and there was 7-1, which is Westmount, which is the big one.
Yeah.
And that's actually one of the highest voting areas in all of Waterloo region. So I knew I had to either come in second or win that one, because otherwise I think I'd won several of the polls, but that one would have so many people there that I wasn't sure if it would counter, and that one came through. And so at that point,
yeah. So your experience was similar to mine, because my scrutineers contacted us by, let's say, 10 o'clock. We knew we had won, but the rest of the candidates were at City Hall waiting for the numbers to come in. And North Dumfries was so bad that they only had maybe 2 or 3 polls by midnight. So they didn't know the official result. But did you win every poll?
No, not every poll, but almost every poll.
Okay.
And if I didn't win it, I was like a couple of votes out. So you could tell I was starting to come out. It was like, I wasn't worried though. It was interesting. Like I felt the momentum. And I think anybody who's won an election, when the numbers start to come in, that you're like, oh no, this is mine. And funny, one of the first votes I lost at council was outdoor fire pits. Well, at that point, we had a big outdoor fire pit going on outside my house, and all the volunteers were coming over. And
so that was your party. You didn't have like a restaurant or someplace or a bar set up. You were doing it at your place as the votes were coming in. Did you have 2 speeches prepared?
No.
No, you didn't have 2 speeches prepared? Come on, that's every politician always has 2 speeches prepared.
Here's the difference between a mayor and a councillor, right? Like, no one asked the councillor to speak whether they win or lose. Like, I wasn't giving a speech. So I think in that moment, it was just more of like, it was more about congratulations. I know, like Wollstonecroft, Duncan popped over, but then a bunch of my friends from CTV, when they got off the air, Pine Street's not far from where I live, so I had TV people come by.
Oh, excellent!
Say bye, have a nice life.
So what percentage of the vote did you get?
Oh my goodness, it would have been. So I got about 1,400. I should know this, shouldn't I?
That's okay. Don't worry about it. You won.
Yeah.
You won. Who came second?
Wollstonecroft.
Oh, he did, eh? Okay. So congratulations. So the good news is you won.
Mm-hmm.
And the good news is the legacy of Jim Durrell lived on.
I was even in the Ottawa Sun, the paper, the Ottawa said, Durrell elected, not the Durrell you think. And then they talked about Waterloo. Cute. Yeah.
And I always say then the contrary to that is the bad news is you got elected. And so what we're going to do is we're wrapping up our podcast today, and we're on the dawn of the Melissa Durrell era in Waterloo politics. And so we're going to have you back another day to start talking about some of these issues that you worked on, because I think it's just fascinating, a lot of the work you did in Uptown, the parks, and just building a new progressive Waterloo. And so listen, Melissa, I really enjoyed our discussion today. I hope you had a blast. I had a blast, and we look forward to having you back on again soon.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, all the best. We'll be in touch soon. Thank you for listening to another edition of the Old Grey Mayors podcast. If you have any ideas for stories or people you would like us to interview or reach out to, please feel free to contact us. And thank you again.